All people have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of smiley face feelings.
Good day, or good night, all ye who join us. This is the Midnight Seminar. We have, for your listening pleasure, a two-part episode about the darkest time of the year. Literally, like the part with the longest nights. We get into talking about the darkness, we talk about the holiday season, we talk about the passage of time, and just a warning, we also get into decay and death as well. I do think that these ruminations can be pretty helpful. They were for me, but we are not running a self-help podcast. Doug has a PhD in philosophy, and I have a PhD in history. When we offer our reactions and analyses, we are coming from those perspectives and with those credentials, but as it gets really deep into human psyches and patterns of behaviors, we aren't writing up any prescriptions. That's a different type of doctor, not us. So with that being said, enjoy this deep, dark dive. This one is less overtly spooky than our previous episode, but it's oh so human. It's very philosophical. If that's your thing, I'm so glad you're here. I hope you enjoy. Part 2 will be out soon. It will be a little bit more grounded in some historical examples, as well as more big questions. So this is the darkest time of the year, Part 1. Godspeed. Hello, Doug.
Hello, Tara.
It is the darkest time of the year.
It is. Yes, it's dark. It's cold.
We're not burying the lead here. We're actually talking about the darkest part of the year today and like winter coming.
Yeah.
So I want to know, what do you do in the dark?
Like in general?
Like with your longer nights. I do actually want to know what you do with the longer nights, but saying that also reminds me of like what you do in the shadows.
Yeah.
And we didn't mention that show or movie when we talked about vampires.
Oh, that's true. That was an oversight.
It was an oversight.
No, you can't cover everything. But yeah, that's a really kind of offbeat one.
Oh, so good. So, okay, at least we're showing our love now. But yes, what do the longer nights mean for you?
I slow down. I enjoy cozy things like hot drinks. I always eat more. Like I just find myself being hungry, and I'm sure this is just some biological response, but
yeah. I purchased so many different varieties of cookies today.
I've been buying a lot of cookies too. See, that's what happens. We've got to load up for the coming of winter.
Yes.
I actually spend, so in the fall, I think in particular in the month of November, I usually have a theme for my thinking, reading, contemplation, and I do tend to spend a lot of time thinking about death in the month of November. So I reflect on it. I like to go for walks in cemeteries. I like to read bleak Russian novels this time of year. It feels
yeah, you lean in.
They usually last me through the winter, and then by spring I'm ready for something brighter. But yeah, I really get into it.
That's amazing. Well, I am 0% surprised by your response. You already brought up like 3 key things that we'll talk about today. So that's great. I think I struggle a little bit at this time of year, like a lot of people.
Okay.
But I just joined a new gym and it's open very late. And I do actually like love a good late night workout when the gym is not busy. So I think I'll get up to that.
Nice. Yeah.
Steve and I are still working through Buffy, the Vampire Slayer.
Okay.
So we'll keep that up. And I also want to keep up with my increased volume of crafts this winter.
Yeah.
I haven't decided on my next round of crafts yet, but I'm sure they'll be weird. And that's just a good indoor activity. And it would be a nice wind down.
It's good to have indoor things to do.
Yes.
To keep yourself busy.
Yes, but I think it can be hard to compile a satisfactory and sustainable list. So
I'm curious, I always feel disoriented and a little sad the first day when we change the clocks and it gets dark earlier. I'm always there's some part of me that's just
yeah.
It doesn't last for me. I know for some people this season can be a real downer. It goes away pretty quickly for me, but always on that first day, it catches me off guard and there's a feeling of sadness there.
It's such an abrupt transition.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we have much to discuss tonight. And
Yes.
again, you're just a step ahead of me in bringing up all of this stuff organically.
All right, let's get into it.
Okay, so we gather here again to meet for the Midnight Seminar. We should maybe reintroduce the podcast just a little bit.
Yeah.
So this is episode 2. And episode 1 was a Halloween episode, which I think was appropriate given our shared interests and our friendship origin story. But I think most of our episodes are going to be standalone episodes. So maybe tied to topics that are on our mind in a particular season or moment, like this one. I think that's where we're starting, but they aren't dependent on prior episodes, right? Would you say that that's your vision?
Yeah.
All right. So obviously that won't be true for two-parters, but I mean topic by topic. So we should probably say who we are and what we're doing now that we've kind of covered our hibernation routines. But Steve gave us such a nice introduction in our first episode, didn't he?
He did, yeah. That was great.
I love when the producer pops in. It always feels dramatic and important. I think he just called us modest or humble or something. He probably could have just said we were awkward.
Yeah, that would work too. But he's too sweet to say that.
Well, now I'm thinking maybe I'll just splice in some of his clip because I'm still awkward.
Sounds good.
The hosts of this podcast are Tara and Doug, who are both great scholars, but are a little bit shy about these achievements. However, I insisted on sharing a few details about their background because I feel it's important to provide a little bit of context for these two random people you're about to encounter on the internet. Both Tara and Doug have PhDs. Tara has a PhD in history and Doug has one in philosophy, and they met teaching at one of the premier boarding schools in the United States. They both won the endowed title for Best Junior Faculty Member while working at the school, and have also both won teaching and academic awards throughout their graduate work and scholarship.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's talk about the darkest time of the year, and I will set the scene for you.
All right, eyes closed.
There's a bite to the air as you trot up to your front door at the end of the day's outing. You should have put on one more layer, but you haven't pulled your thickest scarves or winter jacket from the back of the closet yet. You hear crunching leaves underfoot. Above, the almost bare branches groan and creak, singing autumn's final song through the velvet cloth of nightfall. There are no more hovering insects at your porch light. It burns alone. The wind whips you once more like a ghost tugging at your back before you push your way over the threshold and into the warmth of your home. You close out the threatening night behind you, leaving the lonely denizens of the dying outside world to fend for themselves in the great black hush beyond your walls. It is 4:37 p.m. Is this a familiar scene to you?
Yeah, I love the ending there. It really drives it home. Yes, that is a familiar feeling, and it nicely captures this time of year.
Yeah, well, thank you. So, okay, off the bat, I'll address climate matters a little bit in our conversation, but not as much as I initially thought it would.
Okay.
So, broadly speaking, the majority of the Earth, mostly in the northern hemisphere, has a fall season with color-changing leaves. And basically everywhere outside of equatorial regions or the poles have some amount of seasonal change throughout the 4 seasons, even though it looks different in different places.
Okay.
So it is actually a huge swath. And you'll hear people say that like the trees are dead in the winter when the leaves are all gone. They just look like gnarled giant sticks. They got no plumage. They're of course not dead. They do this to survive. Deciduous trees store and conserve energy in their trunks by pulling nutrients out of the leaves. That's the color change. And then dropping the leaves, so there's less material to care for. And then the trees go dormant until the spring. So that's what the leaf process of fall is. I am also going to bet that, like, the way we experience seasons in New England have an outsized impact on popular culture, like the iconic 4 seasons.
I think that's right. Yeah, that seems plausible to me.
Yeah. I mean, we were just talking about how, you know, in a Southern California Christmas setting, people might put out fake snow.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know that you're a Northern Hemisphere and an Eastern Seaboard lad, but what do you just picture when I say fall or autumn?
Oh, yeah. Leaves. That's the first thing that comes to mind is just the colorful leaves. And if I were to think a little more about it, I have all sorts of associations like pumpkins, sweaters, certain kinds of music, like softer, more mellow music. I like to pick a pumpkin when I can.
It is the best thing.
I like having them around, you know. Sometimes I just buy them from the store. But carving them is also very fun. There's the whole kind of lead up to Halloween and Halloween itself. That's really big for me. I love getting into that. Like I actually for as much as I love horror, I usually don't watch it outside of the Halloween season because I like to keep it special. So for the longest time, I would only watch it in the month of October. And recently it's been broadening. So like I start in September and I usually cut it off in late November, although sometimes I'll want like a bleak winter horror, you know, sometimes when there's a lot of snow. So there's creeping out on the ends, but usually I limit that for the fall season. And then in early fall, I like apple picking. Just going, you know, like going to a corn maze or something like that.
Yeah, corn maze. That's such a classic.
Yeah. Apple cider.
Yeah.
What about you? Did I
do you see how happy I am?
Yes, I could see the giant
my smile is off my face. Yes, I picture all of that. Me too. Like that's what fall means to me. Everything about iconic fall. I also still like run around trying to catch falling leaves.
Oh, I love that.
Steve has so many videos of me doing this. It's really hard to do. So someone told me this a long time ago, but I think we don't know how to like fully take all the variables into account and predict the falling pattern of a leaf. I think it's like an example of true chaos in nature or something.
That's funny. I was just going to say, it seems pretty chaotic to me, so it's not surprising.
I think like literally it is chaotic. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yes. And I love the falling leaves. I mean, the price that you pay is that then they fall and they're not on the trees anymore. And I love looking at the fluffy, colorful trees. Mm-hmm. But I think anything that kind of flutters down from the sky, like snow or petals or leaves, is so like calming. But then I find the wind so invigorating. Like I love the fall.
I really like walking through leaves that have fallen. Yeah. Like when people don't rake and there's like a big pile on the sidewalk or something. I love that.
Oh, the sound of the crunching leaves and the smell of the leaves and just how they look. Yeah. What we're describing is like the iconic fall that there's literally an industry for too, right? Like you said, apple picking, pumpkin picking, there's pumpkin beers and hay rides. And I really appreciate what you said. This is true for me too. We might be overrepresented in this area, but it's very closely tied to Halloween season, the Halloween coming. And October is the month that I think really embodies that image and fuels the industry. Did you ever read Anne of Green Gables?
I haven't actually.
I think it's from that book. She says, "I'm so glad I live in a world where there are Octobers." And like, me too, girl.
Oh, that's great. That's such a perfect line for you.
Yes, I know. And at the end of the month, of course, the very end of the month, we get our most beloved holiday.
Yes.
And then there's a shift.
Yeah.
Everything that we named about what fall means to us is from the early fall. And then we have all of November and most of December before the winter solstice. So every year, once Halloween passes, like, I feel a very familiar set of emotions wash over me. And it feels something like light seasonal depression mixed with deja vu. Because I have indeed done this transition before, like 34 times to be exact. But I kind of forget every year and then remember anew every year how particular and like specific and contemplative, and for me kind of hard, this time of year is after Halloween, right before winter comes. Like, I think the late fall, November into December, does kind of get overlooked as a distinct time of year. And also, I would argue, a very specific psychological moment.
Can you tell me more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think a lot of things can be happening at once. Like in our climate, there's also a temperature drop, like a sizable temperature drop that occurs at some point that makes it no longer comfortable to be outside. And for me, and probably for you, there is this real joy in the build up to Halloween, and then it comes and it passes. And for me, Halloween peaks at October 31st, but I do still kind of lament the day coming and going every year. And then immediately following Halloween, I feel like our winter holiday season just like rears its jolly old head, and it kind of drives me crazy. There is this like encroaching into Halloween of the winter holiday season. And I will not stand for it. It's offensive. Do you experience this in stores and stuff?
So I actually, for the first time this year, noticed that even before Halloween, I saw some Christmas stuff out in the stores. At this point, I'm used to it. And it's the same for Halloween. It's like in August, I'll start to see Halloween stuff out. And similarly, I mean, maybe you have a different association because you love Halloween so much that it's like exciting. But I do feel that, yeah, it's gotten a little out of control. I'm curious to hear more about what you have to say about this time of year, because given what you've said so far, I expect that we might feel differently.
I think we will.
I love Halloween, but I don't experience that sense of like loss and mourning. I mean, it's always like, oh, that nice thing is gone, but I don't feel that I enter into a bleak, desolate period of nothingness, which it sounds like that's what you're pointing to.
It sounds like you just know how to lean in and navigate it.
Well, I will say, like, one thing I was thinking about when you were talking, I wonder if some of this has to do with like the way I relate to the fall in general. So for me, my experience of fall, even in the early days, it feels like a transitional season to me. And there's always like a hint of the coming of winter in my experience of fall. It's like goodbye summer, welcome winter, but not yet, because we're in this transitional phase. And so I think, and because I have established these rhythms and things that I look forward to, like I know what's going to happen in November. For me, it's like Russian novel time, death reflection time. I start doing different meditations, and I have this rhythm. And I also, this is something that you and I might differ on, I love the winter holidays. I understand the objections and how annoying it is and the stores and all of that, but I love the spirit of Christmas. And I know that it's been commercialized to hell. Sorry, I'm going to pause because my cat is right here by the mic, and it's probably going to make some kind of interfering noise. So I've got to get this guy out of here. Sorry, buddy. I know you want to snuggle. Let's go. So as I was saying, I think because I like Christmas and even Thanksgiving, I really made a point. Like, I used to hate the holidays, and I made a pretty deliberate effort to learn to enjoy them. And for me, this involved just like figuring out what I thought was good about these holidays and just deciding to really orient towards that and prioritize it. So there are all sorts of things that are not good about Christmas and Thanksgiving, but also gratitude is great, sharing is great, giving is great. And so I just try to think about that.
There's so much that's like cute and nice about it, and I get along with my family, and I love making gifts for people. I can get on board with all of that. I think the shifting psychology of the late fall impacts me largely because the leaves are down and it looks so different. So I'm in Vermont and I'm not up in the mountains, so we'll have leaves through October, but it really is just about at the end of the month that it just looks like a completely different landscape. You see all these structures closer to your home that the foliage was hiding. It does suddenly get cold. And again, like if you're in the South or something, I think you have those beautiful color changing leaves through November. So I imagine that part would feel a little bit different. But I think it goes from looking like a landscape that is very much alive and fun and beautiful into a landscape that looks very desolate. I love when it starts snowing. It is, again, something nice and pretty and serene, something fluttering from the sky, like the leaves had. But there is usually a waiting period in between in the places that I have lived. And I find that to be the difficult time, and it coincides with the nights getting longer and longer and longer.
Yeah.
So I think we're trying to sit in that moment for today. Like, December seems to just have this indelible stamp of Christmas on it in any part of the world where Christmas is celebrated. And it is the biggest global holiday, especially because a lot of people like me, I think like you, observe it strictly as a secular holiday, like despite its very Christian and pagan roots. And there's the huge holiday season committed to it. Yes, it shows up in stores earlier and earlier. I believe in like the sacredness of October as the Halloween month. I don't mind seeing stuff pop up in August and September because I'm like gearing up.
Okay.
But I do like a summerween vibe that is different than the fall Halloween vibe. So I love like summer slasher movies, and I feel like campfire tales, like all of that lends itself to a very different type of spooky summer season. And then,
that's a good point. Yeah.
Right. We make our own seasons and holidays according to our own interests. And that's definitely how I have done like my spookiness in the summer. And then there's a big shift. I don't leave Halloween decorations up all year, for example.
Okay.
I take them out mid to late September. So I've let my October bleed as well. But
I mean, mid to late September seems reasonable. I think you could even go early September if you wanted to.
Yeah, a couple years it's been September 1st, but I want it to feel very special. I think I am not ready quite yet for the winter holidays once October ends, because I burn out on them.
Yeah.
And it has a lot to do with the commercialism. And Halloween's commercialism has gotten really out of hand as well. But for, I think, several different reasons, the Christmas commercialism has bothered me more. So let's try to do our best to do what the stores don't do and like table Christmas for now.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Instead, I'd like to know how you feel about November and like what even is November. So you said before, like, it's the death month.
Yeah.
You're very historically grounded in saying that. But is there anything else you'd say to kind of define November as a moment?
It's interesting. I think that a lot of what you're saying is actually helping me understand my own relation towards November. And one thing that I think happens is that because there's no easy off the shelf kind of thing to celebrate or expect like there is with Halloween or Christmas, one has to invest, into November and make it something. And so for me, I think what I'm going to say is going to be I actually don't feel that I could talk about November and bring up a bunch of associations where you would immediately click and say, oh yeah, that's the iconic stuff that we associate with November. It's probably going to be a lot more personal. And for me, it's like I would characterize it as a period of waiting, a slowing down. There's a quality of patience for me and expecting. And I think that this is part of responding to the falling leaves and saying goodbye to that beautiful time of year that I love, and knowing that, at some point we're going to have lovely snow and it's going to be great, but we're not there yet. So now we're really in the transition point where there's not much going on, and visually the world is not as pretty. So the time for me has a lot more, I would say, inner significance than outer significance, and it tends to be very introspective. Sometimes I get gloomy, but not always. Sometimes I'm just like more, I want to read different kinds of things that are like getting into deeper questions.
Shocker, you are such a philosopher.
The questions that torment me that I can't answer and I don't think I'll ever answer, those are the ones I want to start opening up when November comes.
Yeah, this all suits you so well, because when I prepared for our conversation and looked into some histories and some reflections that people have had, it does really seem like we land on, it's a bridge. It's a bridge between the iconic fall and the winter, and it is a very philosophical month. And I hear that in everything you're saying, and you're a philosopher, so that makes a lot of sense. As far as November associations, I agree that many would be personal. Thanksgiving is maybe the one obvious one for Americans, although there's a lot we could say about Thanksgiving. I think we'll also table that for now.
Okay, yeah. But even if you have that, it's still not something.
I like what you said, like it's not an off-the-shelf thing. Like you buy a turkey or whatever, but
Yeah. There's not like people aren't, chomping at the bit to get their Thanksgiving decorations up a month early. It's not that kind of holiday.
Like you'll see a shelf of available Thanksgiving decorations because consumerism, but it is not the industry leading like decor.
Yeah, a couple turkeys to hang up or whatever.
The other thing I think of is the end of daylight saving time. So really, like the darkness comes in fast.
Yeah, it does.
Let's trace the whole arc of fall from the bright colors into the darkness and into the transition into winter. These are all things that a lot of people have thought about and have written about in the past. And one of the things that always washes over me in November is a little poem that I have in my head. Shall I recite it for you?
Yeah, go for it.
Fall arrives with a whisper, sings out a crescendo, and then dies with a sudden gasp.
Ooh.
So poetic, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love that. Who's
Okay, so I looked all over for its origin before remembering that I wrote it.
I was going to say, is that wow, that's awesome.
Yes, but I am so not special because in my search, I found tons of autumn poems by like some of our best known poets, definitely the short list of like famous male poets that you're likely to encounter in high school, like Yeats and Keats and Percy Shelley, beautiful autumnal poems from around the world, old and contemporary, from poets of all walks of life. Can I read you a poem by my girl Emily Dickinson?
Yeah.
The name of it is Autumn. The hue of it is blood. An artery upon the hill, a vein along the road. great globules in the alleys, and oh, the shower of stain, when winds upset the basin and spill the scarlet rain. It sprinkles bonnets far below, it gathers ruddy pools, then eddies like a rose away upon vermilion wheels. What strikes you?
There's something dark to me about it. Something, the image of blood and an artery on the hill, a vein along the road, great globules in the alleys. It feels kind of dark to me.
Yeah.
Spilling the scarlet rain. I assume these are like references to the leaves, the red leaves, but likening them to bloodshed. Celebrating in one way the brightness, clearly, the visual, the impressive visual scene, but also like likening it to the spilling of blood, which I suppose, it feels right in a way because it is, although the trees aren't dying, the leaves are dying.
Yeah.
And it feels kind of dark to me. I don't know. What do you make of it?
So some people talk about it perhaps being a reflection on the Civil War. I think she wrote it in 1862, but I think we can consider it in our context here anyway. I wanted to use this one because, to me, it captures the life of the fall as well as the death imagery. And I feel like that's really resonant. I feel so invigorated by the leaves. It does feel like my lifeblood made manifest. But also because I thought the poem was very appropriate in light of our last conversation about vampires. Because it gets very gory. And I really like that. There's life and commotion and there's death. And I think that there's this exit at the end, right? Like eddies away.
Yeah.
It's all intense, but then it's fleeting.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an important part of the fall experience as well, is that it can feel very fleeting.
Yes, absolutely.
There are some other really famous fall poems or like lines from other fall poems that I thought had crossed my path before when I was looking, maybe like in my English major. I double majored, maybe just in popular culture. So I won't inundate you, and we don't need to do a close reading on all of these lines. But I think it helps to get some of the language on the table, because I'm wondering if there might be a set of philosophical questions that are kind of just perpetually recycled in contemplations of the fall. And poets, I think, are one group that is helpful to look towards to collect data on thoughts and feelings. I'll go to a moody poem.
Okay.
This is just an excerpt, just the opening lines from Percy Shelley's Ode to the West Wind. O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being, thou from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven, like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing, blah, 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 blah. The wind is like a creator and a destroyer in that poem. He mentions leaves a lot. The poem's kind of ultimately about like spreading new seeds for spring to come, but there is like the passing of time, the promise of renewal later. But I also think it's kind of like classic autumnal imagery.
Yeah.
I love that we get ghosts.
Can you read that one more time?
Yes, absolutely. O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being, thou from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing. It goes on and on and on from there.
Okay, yeah. So that's a good characterization of autumn wind. Very rich. I like that.
Yeah, I like it too. And it's the wild wind.
Yeah.
There are dead leaves. There's a lot of darkness. We get the ghosts.
Yeah, it crams a lot of mood and evocative imagery into a very short space. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, again, the poem is much longer, but I just won't do a good job with long poems.
Yeah, that's fine. I feel like that's enough.
Yeah.
It's just a nice
enough.
excerpt talking about the autumn wind. I think that's great.
Yeah, because wind, I think, is another kind of iconic part of it, right? You picture the leaves swirling up and blowing on by. All right, I'll do one more. Again, it's just an excerpt, but I wanted to find something more contemporary.
Cool.
So I'm going to read the end of a Joy Harjo poem called Fall Song. And Harjo was the first Indigenous American poet laureate.
Okay.
She's a member of the Muskogee Nation. Really amazing. Forever will be a day like this strung perfectly on the necklace of days. Slightly overcast, yellow leaves, your jacket hanging in the hallway next to mine.
Oh.
What do you feel from that?
There's something like, I feel like it's supposed to be a nice feeling. Somehow it feels sort of sad to me. I don't know why. There's something maybe nostalgic.
I definitely think it's nostalgic.
Okay. And it's interesting that it's talking about forever. Forever will be a day like this. But the image that it gives in the poem itself, for me, there's a real sense of something ephemeral. It's a very fleeting image and very specific. It's like an interesting contrast to me.
Yeah, and isn't that so perfect for the autumn backdrop? Like
Yeah.
this fleeting, ephemeral.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, I love that poem. And again, I think I just read the closing lines of it. This is so easy to picture.
Yeah, I agree.
Even though it feels so personal.
Yeah, and very simple. Like that, it does something
Yes.
that really great poems do. Like,
Yes.
if you can do it very simply, that to me is a sign of like you've nailed something.
One more question. Do you know the song All Too Well by Taylor Swift?
No, I don't. I'm afraid not. Sorry.
Autumn leaves falling down like pieces into place, and I can picture it after all these days. It doesn't sound familiar.
No, but it sounds nice.
So it's many people will know the song.
Okay,
I
yeah,
will probably cut this out, but it's another like capture the moment, like fall sounding song, and her fan base talks about how like fall based it is. She mentions like autumn leaves, plaid shirts, wind in her
plaid.
hair.
That's another. Plaid is a big, yeah.
That song, too, is a rumination on time passing. There's sadness, there's healing, there's growth, reflection. Obviously, I can go on and on, but I won't. I do hope it's not like kind of a crime to not read Keats's poem that's called To Autumn. But again, it's long and I won't do a good job with it.
You can't read them all anyway. There's a bunch of good ones.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yes. I think it might, if you asked someone who knew a lot about poetry to name a classic autumn poem, they might say that one. He talks about the fruitfulness, but also the fading beauty and life of the season. It kind of becomes an elegy for like the lost signs of life in the world around him, and things decay and they're transient. Again, like all the themes that we would expect to see recurring in a famous poem about autumn. I think that if you just look up famous historical or contemporary poets, maybe songwriters too, a lot of them will ruminate on autumn to comment on the passage of time, fleeting beauty, the rush or the melancholy. You've said this a couple times, a slowing down of sorts.
Yeah.
And it also, strikes me that those things are very much aligned with speaking about being in the autumn of one's life.
Yeah.
Like likening the stages of life and development to the seasons.
Yeah.
The spring of youth, explosion of growth and potential. Then the summer is like the peaking of your life. You're still young, you have energy, some abundance. And then fall is like the come down from that.
Mm-hmm.
More contemplative, more reflective. You have maturity. Hopefully you're harvesting the fruits of earlier labor. And then winter is the late stage.
Yeah.
Stillness, rest, and then the big end.
Yeah. I was actually thinking when you were describing your ambivalence towards this time of the year, that, well, first of all, I'm sure you're not alone. Most people that I know hate this time of year or feel like, what's it for?
Yeah.
And
What's it for? That is the perfect way to say it. I'm trying to get out of that, but that really does capture it.
And I was also thinking that because to me, because it's such a contemplative time of year, and because for me it's very rooted in where I feel myself to be in the cycle of the year and the turning of the seasons, and the connection with human cycles, the cycle of a human life is very apparent for me too when I'm thinking about these things. So I was thinking as you were speaking that most people are also really uncomfortable with aging. It's a very uncomfortable topic. We prefer to avoid it, and we hate it when it comes.
Yeah.
And so I'm just thinking that like one way to think about these things I mean, here's a starting point for me. You're not going to get away from it. you can't get from fall to winter to summer without going through this time of year. And similarly, when you're born into this human life, you're not going to get away from aging. That's part of it's starting from the moment you're born, and it doesn't look as bad when you're young, but it's already happening. We're already on that road. And one of the ways that I think about philosophy actually is as a tool or a set of skills, or like a craft of learning to look deeply at difficult truths that we often want to turn away from, so that we can really come to understand them. When I say that I tend to get more contemplative this time of year, I do think a lot about aging, and I reflect on that regularly. This is part of why I spend my time in the cemeteries, which, by the way, the cemetery that I love to walk in has the grave of Emily Dickinson, our girl. So
stop!
Yeah, she's right up the road from me. Yeah.
I mean, I know she's in the area, but I didn't know you were that close.
We'll have to go, go to her gravesite next time you're here.
Oh my God, absolutely. Oh.
So I guess like what I'm trying to say here is sometimes when there's something we don't like that we can't avoid, we try to make it into something that it isn't, right? So we try to like spruce up the aging process. We cover it up in all sorts of ways. Or we look for some entertainment or something to get our minds out of where we are in this period of the year. And I think that there is a different way, which is like somehow, for me at least, going towards the uncomfortable truth of what this time of year suggests about the temporary nature of the things we love, including our own lives, our loved ones, our own bodies. To me, somehow going towards that, although it's uncomfortable, it leads to this greater, there's a kind of patience and forbearance, I guess, that seems to just grow out of that naturally. So that's like a big part of my orientation towards these things.
That makes so much sense to me, because I think why I struggle with the holiday season creeping up, it's so rooted in consumerism, but also I think of it as really forced cheer.
Yeah.
And what you just said about not wanting to sit with the discomfort, so we cover it up, I feel like that's what I see people doing. And that's what
really
so many of us do in this time of year, where I do recognize a potential value in just putting that off a little bit. It is so contemplative. It feels so profoundly human to like walk through a cemetery and think about death. And if you're really going for it, like this is the time of year to do that.
That's perfect. Yeah.
So I like that. I think I struggle because I don't know how to lean in, because there is all of this tinsel covering it.
That's a great point. Yeah. And there's not a lot of like, this is not a common thing to do, right? For me, it grows out of, I more or less made it up because I was looking for some way to attune myself to what felt appropriate for this time of year. I shouldn't say I made it up. What I mean is that I made up these kinds of routines that I do this time of year.
Yeah.
But this way of looking is, people have been doing this in all kinds of traditions, philosophical and religious, for forever. But yeah, I think you're right that there's a looking away or a covering up. I think that if we were more in touch with this is getting into a larger theme, but if we were more in touch with the fact that we are animals living in a natural world, that we are a part of that world, then I think we would culturally, we would be better positioned to orient towards this time of year. We would have practices and rituals and shared activities that we would engage in, because it's clear to me that it's not just some quirk about me. It's not just because I'm interested in philosophy that I feel this way this time of year. Like it's something, there's something in the nature of what we
Yes.
are as animals, right?
Yes, there is.
And I think that if we were to have that more clearly in view as a culture, and to build some holidays or celebrations or activities around that, I think it would be really helpful.
Yeah, and I mean, you and I speak from the same, like, we as kind of like following mainstream American cultures. I mean,
Right.
I will eventually tell you a little bit more about some holidays and the history of some holidays. But when you're talking about, a walk through a graveyard, El Dia de los Muertos, like, has this. I had several like big questions for you, and they've like all come up. So this is awesome. I was going to ask you, like, what is the value of thinking cyclically? Because now you're talking about cycles, like that all is in here.
Yeah.
Well, you appreciate the summer and the fall and the spring because you go through the winter. But then I'm like, oh, I kind of like the winter. Does this boil down to me just like having trouble for 1 month and like that's my cycle? But I mean, just thinking about like months, one way to conceive of like a month is basically a moon cycle. It doesn't match up perfectly, but the passage of time like is so cyclical, except I see it so linearly. So I don't know how to reconcile that in this time of year, even though my brain has these things on it.
Well, there's a lot of really interesting stuff here. So you said that you tend to think linearly, and I think that we should distinguish different ways of thinking and different elements of our experience, because I would bet that a big part of your experience is attuned to cycles and rhythms, whether you're consciously thinking of time in that way or not. I mean, just think about the cycle of a day. The morning feels different from the afternoon, feels different from the night. We sort of can't help but to carve out our time and the passage through time in ways that repeat. And this helps us to orient ourselves, right? It helps us to feel like it, and our energy is influenced by this, our moods are influenced by this. So it's a deep part of our experience, even though on top of all that, messy, sort of like just intuitive how we feel, where we feel ourselves to be in time. On top of that, the rational intellect imposes a structure which says there's day 0, and then there's day 1, and then there's day 2, on and on to infinity. And each day is carved up into this many minutes and hours and so on, which is itself a kind of cycle, but it gives the impression of this this totally uniform, onward, unidirectional progression of time, which, I don't mean to say that that's not true or real, or that time doesn't work like that. I think that probably is, insofar as we can talk about an objective world, which we don't have to get into the debates about that, but that probably is what it's like if there is any such thing. No human being experiences.
Sorry, that's just so good. I don't know if I should ask you 100 questions and open up a giant can of worms, or if we'll get there as my philosophy education continues.
We can put a pin in it, and I'm happy to respond or whatever. But I think people don't experience time in that flat, precise, linear way. We think about it in that way. We say it was, 33 days ago that I did this, and I've got 74 more days until I go on this trip or whatever. When we think about it, that's how we conceptualize. But as we experience the passage of time, if you just imagine what it feels like when you're in a rush, the passage of time, and what it feels like when you're bored and waiting and standing around in line and someone's, not, or the light has changed and somebody's not going, right? The whole experience of time changes based on these perceptions. And so this is all just to say that how we experience time is very malleable, and it's very dependent on our perceptions. And one of the things that we perceive constantly, I think, whether consciously or not, is where we're located in various cycles. Again, the simplest way to see this is to just think about the passage of time in a given day, morning noon, and night. When we enjoy fall or autumn, when we enjoy it as such, like when I enjoy the fall for what it is, as being that particular season, I think there is a part of my experience that's infused with this sense, an intuitive sense of where I am in the cycle of the seasons. There's like a hint that the impending winter seeps into my consciousness of fall. And that's why there's like this kind of, it feels fleeting. It feels somehow, I would say it's like more mature or somber than the spring for me, even though it's very joyful and fun.
Yeah.
It has that flavor. And I think that's because we know where it's located. When you ask what's the value of thinking cyclically, I actually think I would want to answer a slightly different question and answer what's the value of getting back in touch with the cyclical things that we already feel? What does it actually mean to reclaim our connection as human beings with the cycles that are a part of nature? And that's why I go to walk in the graveyard, because I could read about it, but and it's interesting. Like, I've been doing this for years, and if you were to ask me, what have you learned? I wouldn't have anything interesting to say. I would say the same old things that everyone else says, like, oh, it's a time of death and decay. Everything dies someday. Everybody knows this. There's nothing new to add. I have no new words. But what happens is a deepening of my own subjective sense of that. I feel more in touch with that. If we want to talk about thinking cyclically, it's like thinking about how we are embedded already in these cycles and rhythms and asking how can we honor that and get back in touch with it in ways that will help us, live our lives, I would say more truthfully, like more in a more connected way.
Yes, like obviously even your circadian rhythm plays such an important part of your every waking and sleeping moment. So, and the Sunday scaries, that is all part of deeply feeling a cycle. And I consider myself a very embodied person. And yet I did just realize listening to you talk that it's I'm just not noticing these really major components of how our brains and routines work. And I love this question of how exactly that's tied to the season, because in one way it's so literal. But also again, these are pretty universal reflections, and the seasons play out slightly differently in different places. So I'm really interested in that. After I lost my dad, I was in my early 20s, and I was so close with him. I had to watch all of the seasons change before I began to heal, I suppose. And I felt very strongly that was connected to the physical world and the climate around me, and that I had to go through all of those rhythms for the first time without him before I could even start to make sense of the new world in which this giant light had gone out for me. That, I think, was the most profoundly I have ever felt in touch with the seasons. Other than that, which is a really sad and dark context, although grief is also very human, and I think noticing that was good for me. Other than that, I have always just appreciated having 4 seasons, and I associate seasonal change and getting to experience each season with happiness. When I lived in the Pacific Northwest for graduate school, and seasonal change looks very different, and it was so pine tree centric. You didn't have the big deciduous forests, and where I was living, it didn't really snow maybe once a year. I felt like everything was so stale that I needed the seasonal change to help me understand the passage of time in a familiar and comfortable and happy way. And without it, I struggled. Now that's probably different for people who live in that climate, who grow up in that climate, and who have there are still seasonal changes, a rainy season, different temperature thresholds, whatever. But when you're used to the pronounced 4 seasons, I think coming out of it does feel like really breaking from a very important cycle in your life.
Yeah, it feels like it's a kind of culture shock, I would say. It's akin to that.
Yes.
I think that the way we're impacted by how the culture around us carves up time and how the natural world expresses the passage of time, which is different in different places. Even when you get the 4 seasons, it's different depending on where you're located. And yeah, I do think that there's something that we absorb, and it's like somehow it would never feel right to me to be in a place where the seasons didn't work the way that I'm used to. And when I say right, I don't mean that they're doing it wrong.
No, totally.
What I mean is that it would always feel slightly off, and I would never feel completely at home. The way that I imagine, like if I were at this age to emigrate to a totally new country with a new language and different customs, I could live there the rest of my life and probably get along very well, but there would always be some part of me that feels like, yeah, I'm not quite adjusted. And I feel like the seasons are like that for me too.
I also heard in what you were saying, just the simple phrase like live in the moment, like the cliche came to mind. And I'm wondering if what you were saying about just noticing, for us, like the November moment, if that is what that is that living in the moment? And also because you are someone who has taught about the philosophy of happiness, is this connected to that at all? Or are we not really talking about happiness here?
Oh, that's interesting. Sometimes, so I would say in a certain sense, yes, we're talking about living in the moment. But sometimes that, like as a popular saying, it means to hell with everything else and everyone else. I'm gonna seize the day and do what I want and enjoy myself. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the moment in a rich sense where it somehow the present moment. And this I honestly find it fascinating that my experience of the present moment in this sense, and I should say it's not always like this. It's not like we go through the month of November always attuned to the fact that it's November. Nobody does this.
Right.
And sometimes you can be very attuned to the present moment in a way that filters out anything outside of it. It's like, like if I have an itch on my elbow, I'm just thinking about itching I don't know where I am in time or space, right? So it flexes. Our awareness flexes. And it's possible to be in the moment in ways that have nothing to do with the seasons. But it's also, you can think of being in the moment in this sense that I'm talking about right now in relation to November. You can think of a moment as somehow containing things that are outside of it or being shaped or flavored by. So this period of November is very much flavored by the seeping in of winter, which is not yet here, but somehow when we attune to this moment in the seasons, we feel the presence of winter looming in the same way that, like in the late afternoon, it's not yet night, but we can feel the coming of night. The late afternoon has a different feeling from early morning, even though, they're both kind of transitional phases. So the present moment can sometimes contain or be influenced by what's to come next or what's being left behind. So I would say that if we think of living in the moment in that sense, then yeah, I am talking about that. One of the things that we talk about in the class I teach on the philosophy of happiness is how there are just so many different ways of understanding that word. And it's a relatively modern innovation, you could say, to think that happiness is somehow concerned with just the experience of pleasure. A lot of people do think of it this way, but it's relatively recent and it's pretty odd actually. If you think of happiness as like a smiley face feeling, right? That kind of it's like it's missing something important, I think, to what we care about when we care about happiness. And one way to see this is to just imagine that you change the word happiness in the following statement. All people have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of smiley face feelings. It sounds ridiculous. So why? Because smiley face feelings, pleasant though they are, they're trivial. And I just, it's like that's not what it's all about. Life is not about smiley face feelings, even though it's great to smile and have fun, but that can't be the whole story.
Yeah.
But there are other notions of happiness that point to something like maybe fulfillment, being well, being fully well, where that includes positive affect. You feel like, this is nice. This is great. I feel good. But I'm not like laughing at a joke or something, but there's a deep sense of inner contentment. And that's another notion of happiness. And this, I think, is it's the relevant sense of happiness for what we're talking about here, because it's connected with another important point you made about not being able to have the beauty without the ugliness, or the fun parts without the bleak parts. So this kind of duality runs through every facet of human life, the good and the bad. Somehow you can't have one without the other. You don't have to expect that it's always going to be smiley face feelings. You don't have to expect that it's always going to be sunshine or pretty flowers or pretty leaves. And somehow there's this idea that I'm very drawn to, that by seeing more clearly and appreciating, and as I've been saying, attuning to the truth of life, which is that there are these cycles. There's no getting around it. It's not a mistake that the leaves are falling. It's not a mistake that my body is aging.
It's not a mistake that I want cookies.
Indeed. But somehow, anyway, what I'm trying to say is that way of cultivating that orientation towards life leads to a form of well-being, a form of happiness that's more stable, because it's not dependent on the fleeting outer conditions.
This notion of being in tune, I think, is really resonant. Terrible pun for you. I guess, like, thinking about my life in young adulthood or whatever, going to grad school kind of puts off your whole early career phase. So I'm still very, like, early career phase. Everything just pushes, like, the linear narrative.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do with your life? Or, when are you going to publish your book, Tara? Soon. It will happen. But I feel like that's what makes me miss some of the rhythms that I otherwise would be very in tune with, because the narratives of our life are so kind of what we think in terms of, like, chapters of our life or whatever.
It's the same for me, right? I'm not constantly. Maybe I'm giving a misleading impression that I'm somehow always, like, aligned with the stars and stuff. No,
you're a human, but you are a very zen human.
This is messy stuff, and everything, every current almost in our lives pushes in the other direction. That's true of the culture that we are embedded in, you and I. It's true of, it's just like basic impulses of our psychology. We want to get away from what's unpleasant. We want to move towards what's pleasant. It's true of, like, the way our attention works, right? And so all of these things are pushing us towards the mode of living that you're describing. And it's extremely hard to counteract those forces. So you just kind of have to, it's like an ongoing battle. You're constantly swimming upstream, and you do what you can to, like, reclaim. I honestly think of it as, like, reclaiming my dignity as a human being. Sometimes I'm just like, I'm a person, damn it. I'm a human being, and I'm going to go sleep in the woods because that's what I want to do, and my animal body is demanding it. And I'm not going to do it every night. I can't do it every night. I wouldn't want to, and it would be a disaster. And I also can't stay constantly attuned to the rhythms of the natural world in a deep way, because I have to use electricity, right? I have to I have to plan my life. I have to plan the coming of a semester, right? So there's always a flex, and there are modes of attention where we're just in linear time and we're planning. There are modes where we're just trying to grit our teeth and get through something. And then can we also allow there to be modes where we're taking a step back and trying to reconnect? Not that we can spend all of our time there, but just some of our time so that we can have that be part of the rhythm of our lives too.
Yeah, I see this difference. I live right off of hiking trails. I'm so lucky. And my experience in the woods, always enjoyable. I freaking love the woods. It is a very different journey to run through the woods and to walk slowly through the woods. And you know me, so you know that I am better suited for the running one, the running version. But I love the slowing down. I can't believe that we have been so drenched in poetry and philosophy. Those are my anti-comfort zones. Those are my discomfort zones. But
were you comfortable in this particular drenching?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm actually finding this incredibly helpful. And I think you're giving words, accurate feeling words to a lot of thoughts and feelings that I've had recently. I have some stuff to tell you about the history of this time of year as told by the way that a select few examples of cultures have celebrated holidays that are very much in line with what we have been discussing. But that seems like a part 2 conversation.
Okay.
I'm so glad that we've gotten into like all of these really big questions so far. I think that having them in mind is actually going to really enrich my understanding of just the kind of down-to-earth history that I want to walk you through.
Cool.
So if that sounds good to you, we'll continue our journey in a slightly different vein, but then we'll bring it back to some of these big questions about living and dying and everything in between.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right, class is adjourned. Thanks for listening. Your hosts are Tara and Doug. The podcast is produced by Tara and Steve. Steve does the sound design as well. And you, dear listener, are the most important part. Thanks for being here.